Three, two, one. What's going on, everyone? You're watching Ash on Comics. My name is Ash, and here's today's comic, Usagi Yojimbo number 5. I did a review of issue number 4. This is part 2 of 2. The story is called The Hero. This is a great issue 4 was a great jumping on point for Usagi. Issue 4 probably should have been number 1. The first story arc, issue 1 through 3, it's a good story, I think, for Usagi fans. But if you weren't ever really a fan of Usagi and you were just jumping in, it's not a really good character development story. It doesn't give you a great introduction to the character. So if you did read those and were like kind of unimpressed, give that some consideration. I did a video on issue 4 that I urge you to check out. It's an amazing issue. I was very much looking forward to reading this one, the finale. It's a 2-part story, and let's show you the book. Now, warning. I mean, this usually goes without saying, but spoilers ahead. Okay, this is a 5-star book, in my opinion. This Usagi Yojimbo is a masterpiece of elegance. It's not the type of book like, say, Jonathan Hickman's House of X and Powers of X, which is so deep and complicated and nuanced and all these different layers. This is like the simple stroke of a paintbrush. It's absolute elegance in its storytelling. The art, of course, it's a cartoon style art, but don't discount cartooning. Like, it is a valid art form in its own right, and Sakai has become a master of it. And let's just get on the story. If you remember, we left off, Usagi was staying in a temple with this lady, and he's escorting her across the land to visit her father. And her husband is kind of abusive. She's a writer, da-da-da-da-da. And they're staying in this temple, and then they hear some sounds. So we cut to this book, and Usagi is fighting this sort of undead, samurai demon thing. This one can never help you. He cannot slay me. As he responds to, "My hero, save me, my hero. I have already destroyed your minions, but you have not defeated me. Only with my death will she be free. But I am the Lord of the Deadlands, and I am unbeatable." And we just see Usagi's fighting. Usagi is a master class swordsman. If you're not familiar with the character, he's sort of based on Miyamoto Musashi, who's one of the greatest samurais believed ever to exist. As far as his prowess with the sword. And Miyamoto Usagi is in many ways taken from that, and he is a badass. There's few in the land that can compete with his prowess. So even this undead thing, he chops off its arm, but it still keeps coming. "There's one thing you don't know about me. Even my bite is death." And so it grabs onto him and bites him on the neck. But Usagi is not deterred. He's got his sword, and he plunges it through himself into the enemy that's grabbing him from behind. And that is a great move. Love this. And then he falls dead, but Usagi's wounded, and we see he was not kidding about the bite. "My hero." And Usagi collapses. "My hero." And he's dead. And I was like, what? What is going on? "My hero." And then he closes the book. And I was like, dang it, Stan, you got me. You got me a second time. He did this in the first issue of this story. And I was like, dang it. And he got me a second time. And that's good. That was good. And so Lady Mura wakes up. They're standing in the temple. And she's like, "Oh, you finished my story?" And he's like, responds. And he's like, "I wish, that the hero and the girl would have lived happily ever after, and she responds that's not how the way, that's not their tradition, that the hero never gets the girl at the end. So the Japanese writing at the time apparently was very much one of like tragedies. It wasn't about like happily ever after like a Western. So anyways, they still hear noises, or at least they hear noises now. And Usagi's like, I know you're out there. And they hear some voices. It's some bandits. They want to rob them, and they're going to hold the girl for ransom. And Usagi's just like, this lady is under my protection. To abandon her would be dishonorable. However, I will let you live if you go now. The bandit's like, what? Is he serious? He sounds confident. Are you sure there are only one samurai in there? I don't want to walk into an ambush. And so the main bandit guy is like, he's bluffing. I saw them in town. There's only two. And so they decide to smoke Usagi out because they were going to burn it. Then they're like, we can't burn a temple. And plus we would, kill everyone. We can't ransom. So I got to smoke them out. There's only one way in and out of the temple. And so the plan is when they come out, they're going to get him. But Usagi is, like I told you, he's a badass. And he comes out of the temple. And the guys in the front are supposed to get him. But he leaps over them and just starts hacking away. And it's just, bandits are no match for Usagi. But Lady Mura comes out and they decide, get him. Get her. We'll use her as a shield. But Usagi's like, I gave you your chance, but I will give you another. Get out of here now. Basically, and I'll let you live. And the cowards that they are, they run. And she's like, you really are my hero. So meanwhile, they get back to the father, and Usagi's escorted her. And the father is reprimanding his daughter. And he's like, you are the wife of a samurai, the daughter of a samurai. A samurai lives to serve his lord. In your home, your husband is your lord. Such is bushido, the warrior code. It may not be right, but it is our way. We live by a harsh, unbending code. Yes, father. You have disgraced your husband. You have disgraced your father, and you have disgraced yourself. You must return. Yes, father. I blame myself for your situation. I encourage you to be headstrong and independent. It gave me great pleasure to hear your accolades, but your husband Seido feels otherwise. And Usagi's thinking to himself that he can't intervene. And one of the great things about Usagi Yojimbo is Stan Sakai. He's Japanese American. He was raised in the West, so he doesn't have the heritage. I mean, he's got the heritage, but he doesn't have the cultural upbringing of being Japanese in Japan. But he's a big student of his heritage. And Usagi Yojimbo is a book that uses Usagi sort of as a voice to explain Japanese culture. And here we see Usagi's like, this is a personal matter, that the code binds them restricts me as well. I cannot get involved. This is one of the cultural aspects. And I'd love, if you read Usagi Yojimbo enough, you will start to get a deep understanding, well, not a deep, but you'll get an understanding of Japanese culture, and it stays true to that. I love this. He never tries to westernize it. He very hard, makes very strong attempts to keep it authentically Japanese. I mean, you just saw this panel where the father's like, you got to go serve your husband. Your husband's your lord. That is so anti-Western culture right now, in the midst of this culture war. But then we see that the husband shows up. Wife, how dare you leave without word? And who was this tramp that you traveled with? Usagi explains that he's just her bodyguard, but he's like, a likely story. And then Usagi's not taking it. He's like, are you questioning my honor? No, stop it. I will return with you, Seizo-san. You have caused me enough embarrassment, wife. We are leaving now. So Usagi can't really do anything, and she has to go. And the father's, he sighs. And he's like, I know you think I'm despicable. And he explains that, the clan leader arranged a marriage, and he's too old to really go against the ways of Bushido or anything, and it's just the way of life. And Usagi's like, I understand. And they both kind of end up agreeing, that there's just a tragedy. But there's, nothing they can do. They're culturally bound. But the father, Usagi says he's going to continue on his journey, and the father is like, I'll loan you a horse. Thank you for, trying to help my daughter. And so Usagi here is happy that he's able to continue his pilgrimage and make the best of the situation. And he's like, it certainly beats walking. And we get this little kind of whimsical moments, and it's unusually cold this time of year, which is seemingly symbolic to come, what's about to come as he heads in the forest and he comes upon a scene that makes Usagi make this face. And he comes to a clearing and he sees Lady Mura down on the ground and a husband standing over her with a sword. Usagi's in shock, looking down, and then he's pissed off. What happened here? And her husband stands and faces him. We were attacked by those bandits you let get away. I was able to drive them off as you did, but not before they killed my wife. Usagi looks around. I see no signs of a battle, no bodies, no blood, no disturbance of the ground. And he responds, do you question my account? And it's clear Usagi kind of does, but again, the cultural bindings. I cannot. There is no real evidence to prove otherwise. We must return her to her father. And Seizo's just despicable. You do it. I've had enough of her. What a vile, despicable person, Usagi says. She's still alive. Lady Mura! I must take you back to your father. She has her last words. And she calls him my hero. Usagi says, but I'm sorry, I'm not your hero after all. But you are my hero. Heroes do not always succeed in their desires, Usagi-san. It is the striving, the trying that makes one a hero. You are my sob. And she passes. And I found this to be a deeply moving part of the book. And I love tales of heroism, but I loved even more tales of what it is to be a hero. And I loved this type of story here where she says, heroes do not always succeed in their desires. And that's a great message. It's true. What makes one a hero is the effort, not the success. And Usagi did everything he could. And unfortunately, he was bound by, the laws of society that restricted him. And we oftentimes find ourselves, even though we may not be in feudal Japan, in Western society, we have different cultural things that prohibit us from doing things that we might otherwise be able to do. And then we get an epilogue. Months later, Seizo, I wanted to compliment you. My lord, you honor me. So Seizo's lord comes. I just finished reading your wife's book about Empress Jingo, and I enjoyed it. Everyone is reading it. It's the talk of the clan. It's a shame that her life was cut so short. He's just shocked. But her fame will live throughout the centuries, maybe even after I and you are forgotten. Ha ha ha. You must be very proud of her, Seizo. But he's not, because he's a despicable, selfish cretin. And he's there just lonely. Look at this great shot of just great use of negative space. Just seeing him in his loneliness, and he's pitiful. Even in death, she mocks me. And he's still, to this point, he still hasn't learned his lesson. Even though, as a reader, we see the moral of the story. I refuse to live in her shadow. You have led me to this Mura. And he opens his gi, it's a kimono, not a gi, and he commits seppuku. Ritual suicide to save his honor, but he never really had any. He was a despicable being, and that's the end of the story. And like always, at the end of every Usagi book, you get some story notes that are about some of the factual, historical things of Japan that inspired this particular story, which I talked about in the last review, and this one too. And this one is talking about Empress Jingu. Did she actually really exist? And you can read this on your own. I love this stuff. It's a great supplement to the books, especially if you find Japanese culture and history fascinating as I do. I'm a big fan of samurai lore and legends and culture and all that stuff. And I'm a big fan of Stan Sakai's writing. This was like a perfect book for me. This is one of the best Usagi books I've read in a long time. I hope you didn't get spoiled. I hope that you read this book and then came to watch my video to see my thoughts on it. But if you haven't, and I did spoil this for you, I'm sorry that you didn't get to experience it the way I did, but hopefully maybe this convinces you that Usagi is something you need to be reading and checking out. If you've never read Usagi Yojimbo, this is like I said, it's a great jumping on point. It's IDW is doing an ongoing series, and you can start here. You can collect the issues. If you want to go back all the way to 1, it probably wouldn't be too difficult to collect. If you want to know more, there's so many trade paperbacks of Usagi Yojimbo. I recommend starting at the beginning with the Fantagraphics stories. He published comics through Fantagraphics in the beginning years, back in the 80s, and then eventually went over to Dark Horse. They're all fantastic, but the Fantagraphic books will delve more into the stories of like young Usagi when he was training under his master, and you kind of get to see the boy, through flashback stories of how he became the character that he is today, and I found that really fascinating. The art is a lot different back then. It was more raw. It's just not as refined as it currently is, but I don't think that'll matter. Also, previous to IDW, all the Usagi stuff is black and white, except for like the rare color special. But should not bother you either. His line work is so outstanding that you don't need to color. Anyways, I hope that I was able to sell you on this book. I'm sorry that I had to spoil it, but I think if you haven't bought it this far, you probably weren't likely to. And maybe, hopefully I changed a mind or two. This is one of my favorite books of all time. As a series. Usagi Yojimbo is one of the best comics ever. It's just classic, and it's just nonstop great. Stan Sakai is the writer and the artist through and through, like every issue. And there's hundreds of issues. You can see here, this is issue 243 if you were doing legacy, accounting. So there's a lot to go back and find. It's beautiful. I just love it. I'm rambling now, so I'm going to end it. Check out some Usagi. Get that first Fantagraphics trade. I'll see you next time. Take care.